Chapter 1. The uninvited wedding feast had become awake, and Clara sat at the edge of it like a ghost. No one dared acknowledge. She'd known coming here was a mistake. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks after the scandal broke, after her name was dragged through every gossip column in the city. After her fiancé married her younger sister in a ceremony that made society pages swoon. The envelope had been cream-colored, expensive, mocking. "We hope you'll join us in celebration." Clara had burned it. Then she'd bought a black dress and come anyway. Pride was a strange, self-destructive thing. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and malice. Conversations hushed as she passed. Eyes followed her like insects tracking carrion. Her sister, radiant in white lace, diamonds catching the light, hadn't looked at her once. Neither had he. They moved through the crowd as though Clara had never existed. As though the 3 years she'd spent planning a future with him had been nothing but an embarrassing fever dream. She sat now at a table in the shadows, champagne untouched, watching the dance floor spin. Her hands trembled in her lap. She'd made her point. She'd shown them she wasn't broken. She was lying. The music swelled, a waltz, old-fashioned and elegant. Couples swept past in a blur of silk and satisfied smiles. Clara felt the walls closing in, the air growing thin. She needed to leave. She should have left an hour ago. She stood, smoothing her skirt with shaking fingers, and turned toward the exit. A man blocked her path. Clara stopped so abruptly she nearly stumbled. He was tall, impossibly tall, and dressed in black that made the shadows around him seem deeper. His presence was a cold weight in the warm room, a note of discord in the waltz. Dark hair fell across a face too sharp to be kind, too controlled to be human. His eyes were slate gray, ancient, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her pulse stutter. "You're leaving," he said. His voice was low, quiet, and somehow carried over the music without effort. Clara's throat tightened. Yes. Don't." It wasn't a request. It was a command, spoken with the casual authority of someone who expected obedience. Clara felt her spine stiffen, despite the fear crawling up her ribs. "I don't know you," she managed. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. "No, but they do." He gestured subtly toward the crowd, toward the cluster of guests, now watching them with hungry curiosity. "And right now, they're wondering why you came alone. Why you're sitting in the dark like a woman waiting to be pitied." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. "That's none of your act like you're with me." The words cut through her protest, sharp and immediate. Clara stared at him, heart pounding. "What?" He stepped closer. The air around him was cold, winter cold, wrong for the heated ballroom. Up close, his features were even more unsettling, to perfect, too still, like a statue given breath but not warmth. His eyes held hers, unflinching. "Your ex-fiancé is watching," he said quietly. "So is your sister. Half the room is waiting to see you run. Don't give them the satisfaction." His hand extended, palm up, elegant and patient. "One dance. Then you leave with your head high." Clara's mind raced. This man was a stranger, possibly dangerous, definitely unnerving. But his words scraped against the raw wound of her humiliation, and she hated that he was right. She could feel the weight of their stares, the anticipation of her collapse. She looked at his hand. It was pale, long-fingered, steady. She took it. His skin was ice against hers. Clara flinched, but didn't pull away. He led her onto the dance floor with a fluid grace that made the other dancers look clumsy by comparison. The waltz shifted, and he drew her into position, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers, proper and precise. Then they began to move. Clara had learned to dance as a girl, but she'd never felt like this, weightless, guided, as though her body knew the steps before her mind did. He led with absolute certainty, spinning her through the crowd like they'd danced together 100 times. She was dimly aware of the whispers starting, the heads turning, but his presence swallowed everything else. "Who are you?" she breathed. "Someone who doesn't belong here either." "That's not an answer." His lips twitched. "No, it isn't." The music swelled. He turned her, and Clara caught a glimpse of her sister's face, pale, shocked, angry. Her ex-fiancé stood frozen beside her, champagne glass forgotten in his hand. The sight sent a vicious thrill through Clara's chest. "Better," the stranger murmured, as though he could feel her shift in mood. "Let them wonder. Why are you doing this?" Clara asked, searching his face for some hint of motive. Kindness didn't live in those cold eyes. Neither did cruelty. Just something older, something patient. "Because," he said softly, I know what it's like to be a ghost in a room full of the living." The waltz ended. Applause rippled through the ballroom, polite and automatic. Clara's stranger released her, stepping back with a small, formal bow. His gray eyes lingered on her face for a heartbeat longer. "Go now," he said. "Walk out like you've won." Clara hesitated, questions tangling on her tongue. But before she could speak, he turned and melted into the crowd, impossibly fast, impossibly silent. She blinked, and he was gone. The ballroom suddenly felt too bright, too loud. Clara turned toward the exit, spine straight, and walked through the staring crowd without looking back. Outside, the night air hit her like a slap. She was shaking not from cold, but from adrenaline, confusion, something else she couldn't name. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat race. Who was he? And why did his touch still burn like frost against her skin? Chapter 2. The shadow at her door. Clara made it 3 blocks before she realized she was being followed. The streets were quieter here, away from the glittering venue. Gas lamps cast pools of amber light across wet cobblestones, and the distant sound of carriage wheels echoed off brick facades. She'd sent her hired coach away hours ago. Pride again, the assumption she'd stay longer, make more of an impression. Now she walked alone through the cooling night, her thin shawl doing nothing against the autumn chill. She'd felt the prickling awareness to streets back, a presence, a weight in the darkness that matched her pace, but never quite revealed itself. Clara's fingers tightened around her small beaded purse. She wasn't fool enough to turn and look. Instead, she quickened her steps, heels clicking sharply against stone, and aimed for the wider boulevard ahead, where traffic still moved and people still walked. The presence followed. Her breath came faster now. The street narrowed, buildings leaning closer together, fewer lamps lighting the way. Clara's apartment was still 6 blocks north. Too far, suddenly, much too far. She should have stayed at the wedding. She should have swallowed her pride and asked someone for a ride, even if it meant enduring their false sympathy. A footstep echoed too close behind her. Clara broke into a run. She heard the pursuit immediately, not bothering with stealth anymore, just speed. Heavy boots against cobblestones, gaining fast. Terror flooded her veins, sharp and chemical. She'd been so focused on surviving social ruin that she'd forgotten the city had other dangers. A woman alone at night, dressed to fine, carrying too little. A hand caught her arm. Clara screamed and spun, her purse swinging wildly. It connected with something solid, and she heard a grunt of surprise. But the grip didn't loosen. Another hand grabbed her shoulder, and she was yanked backward into the narrow space between 2 buildings. "Quiet," a rough voice hissed. "You'll wake the whole." Clara drove her heel down hard on his instep. The man cursed and shoved her against the brick wall. Pain exploded across her back. She opened her mouth to scream again. The man's head snapped sideways with a crack that made her stomach turn. He crumpled like a puppet with cut strings, hitting the ground in a boneless heap. Behind him stood the stranger from the ballroom, one hand still extended from the blow that had sent her attacker down. In the darkness, his gray eyes seemed to catch what little light there was and throw it back, cold and reflective. "You're bleeding," he said calmly. Clara pressed her hand to her temple, felt wetness. The wall. She'd hit her head. How did you follow me?" "Now." He turned without waiting for agreement and started walking deeper into the alley, away from the street. "Wait." Clara glanced at the man on the ground. He wasn't moving. "Is he unconscious?" "He awake with a headache and no memory of this." The stranger paused, looking back at her. His face was expressionless, but something in his stillness suggested impatience. "There are 2 more hunting this district tonight. Do you want to meet them alone?" Clara's legs made the decision before her mind caught up. She hurried after him, her heart still hammering, the taste of fear metallic in her mouth. He led her through a maze of back streets and narrow passages she'd never known existed. The city transformed around them, older architecture, fewer lights, buildings that leaned together like conspirators. Clara lost track of direction. She should have been terrified. She probably was. But the stranger moved with such certainty, such absolute command of the shadows, that she found herself trusting his steps more than her own judgment. Finally, he stopped before a door set into an unmarked stone facade. Old wood, iron hinges, no number or name. He produced a key from somewhere inside his coat and unlocked it with a smooth click. Inside, Clara hesitated on the threshold. Every instinct she had left screamed that this was madness. following a stranger into an unmarked building after he'd attacked a man, possibly killed him, despite his assurances. But the alternative was going back out into streets where men hunted, where she had no protection and no idea how to reach safety. She stepped through the door. The interior was dark until he touched something on the wall. Gaslight flared to life, revealing a narrow hallway with stone floors and walls lined with old tapestries. The air smelled of dust and something else, something mineral and cold, like underground water. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a wooden bench against one wall. "Let me see your head." Clara sat, less because he'd commanded it and more because her legs were shaking too badly to hold her upright. She watched him move to a cabinet, retrieve a clean cloth and a small bottle. When he returned and crouched before her, she flinched. He paused. "I'm not going to hurt you. You just knocked a man unconscious. He was going to do worse than hurt you." His voice was matter of fact, as though stating the weather. He gestured to her temple. "May I?" Clara nodded slowly. His fingers were gentle as he tilted her head, examining the wound. The cloth came away with a small streak of blood, not as bad as she'd feared. He dampened it with liquid from the bottle and pressed it to her skin. "It stung," she hissed. "Disinfectant," he explained. "You'll have a bruise, but no lasting damage." Up close like this, Clara could study his face properly. Those sharp features, the pale skin that seemed to drink in shadow rather than reflect light. The way he moved, economical, precise, like every gesture had been calculated centuries ago and perfected through repetition. "What's your name?" she asked quietly. He hesitated for the first time since she'd met him. "Dorian." "Dorian," she repeated. The name felt old in her mouth, formal. "I'm Clara." "I know." At her surprised look, he added, "I heard them talking about you. At the wedding." Heat crept up her neck. "Gossiping, you mean?" Observing. He set the cloth aside and met her eyes. "You're the scorned Yankee who came anyway. They called you brave or foolish, depending on who spoke. And which did you think?" His mouth curved slightly. "Neither. I thought you looked like someone who had nothing left to lose." The words hit harder than they should have. Clara looked away, blinking against the sudden sting in her eyes. "Why did you help me?" "At the dance? And now?" Dorian stood, moving to a small table, where he poured water from a pitcher into a glass. He brought it to her without answering. Clara took it, drank, felt the cold liquid steady her nerves, because, he finally said, "I recognize something in you. A kind of desperation I've seen before." He paused. "And because those men tonight weren't ordinary thieves." Clara's fingers tightened on the glass. "What do you mean?" Dorian was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, Clara felt the night shift around them as though something had been decided, some threshold crossed. "They were hunting for someone specific," he said softly. "Someone connected to me." "Why would they think I?" Clara stopped. Understanding crept cold down her spine. "The dance. They saw us together." "Yes. So this is your fault." Anger flared, sharp and welcome after the fear. "You made me a target." "Perhaps." His gray eyes held hers, unflinching. "Or perhaps I saw them circling you before I intervened, and the dance gave me an excuse to mark you as protected." Claire's breath caught. "Protected? By me?" He said it simply, as though it explained everything. As though his protection meant something absolute in a world she didn't understand. "Who are you?" Clara whispered. Dorian smiled, and for the first time, she saw his teeth white, sharp, wrong. "Someone you should be afraid of," he said. "But tonight, at least, I'm the only thing standing between you and worse." The gaslight flickered. Clara's hand trembled against the glass, water sloshing, and somewhere in the building above them, something moved. Chapter 3. The things he doesn't say sound came again. Footsteps overhead, deliberate and slow, crossing what must have been a floor above them. Clara's eyes snapped to the ceiling. Dorian didn't move, didn't even glance up, but something in his stillness changed, became watchful. "Is someone else here?" Clara's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "Always." He took the glass from her trembling hand and set it aside. "This building houses others like me. You're safe here. They won't touch what I've claimed." The words settled over her skin like ice. "I'm not. I haven't agreed to be anyone's." Poor choice of words, but his expression suggested it wasn't poor at all, just honest. "You're under my protection." "That's what they'll understand." Clara stood abruptly, her head swimming slightly from the movement. The room tilted, then steadied. "I need to go home. I need to. My apartment isn't far. I can." "Those men know your face now. They know your scent." Dorian moved to block the door, not threateningly, just present. Immovable. If I let you leave, you'll be dead before morning. My scent? Clara heard the pitch of her voice rising, hysteria creeping in at the edges. What are you talking about? What kind of sit down, Clara? Don't tell me what to sit down. This time the command carried weight, something that pressed against her chest and made her knees buckle. She found herself back on the bench, breathing hard, staring at him with a mixture of fear and fury. Dorian exhaled slowly, and the pressure in the room eased. I'm sorry. He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. I'm not accustomed to explaining myself. Try, Clara bit out. Her hands were shaking again. She pressed them against her thighs, willing them still. Because right now, you're a stranger who's telling me I can't leave. And I've already had one man tonight try to control where I go. Something flickered across his face, anger, maybe, or recognition. He was silent for a moment, then moved to the bench and sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. Up close, she could see the unnatural perfection of his skin, the way his chest didn't rise and fall with breath. What are you? She whispered. What do you think I am? Clara's mind raced through impossibilities. The cold skin, the inhuman speed, the teeth she'd glimpsed, the way he'd knocked a grown man unconscious with a single blow. It's not possible. Many things are possible. Your world is smaller than you know. Vampire, Clara breathed, and saying it out loud made it both more and less real. You're telling me you're a vampire? Dorian didn't confirm or deny, just watched her with those ancient gray eyes. And if I were? Would you scream? Run? A pause. Faint? I don't faint. But her voice shook, betraying her. This is insane. Vampires are their stories. Gothic novels. They're not real? He tilted his head slightly. I assure you, we are devastatingly real. And those men hunting you tonight? They work for a house that would very much like to know why one of their enemies was seen dancing with a mortal woman at a society wedding. A house? Vampire families, factions. We have politics, territories, laws. His mouth twisted slightly. Just like your world, but older, crueler. Clara pressed her hand to her forehead, trying to process. This morning she'd woken up dreading a wedding. Now she was sitting in a strange building with a man, a creature who'd just calmly informed her that monsters were real and she'd stumbled into their war. Why did you help me? She asked again. If dancing with me put me in danger, why do it at all? Dorian was quiet for a long moment. The gaslight flickered, casting shadows across his sharp features. I told you. I recognized something in you. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. He stood, moving to a narrow window set high in the wall. Through it, Clara could see only darkness and the faint glow of distant street lamps. I've been watching that wedding venue for 3 weeks. There's a mortal who works there, a caterer with gambling debts. He's been selling information to House Corvin. Guest lists, security details, schedules. Why would vampires care about mortal weddings? Because mortals with money have power, influence, and influence is currency in both our worlds. He turned back to her. I was there to intercept whatever intelligence he planned to pass along. I didn't expect to find you sitting alone in the dark, looking like he stopped. Clara waited, heart pounding. Looking like what? Like someone who'd already decided she was a ghost. His voice softened, lost some of its cold edge. I've worn that expression for longer than you've been alive. I know what it looks like. The words hit something raw inside her. Clara looked away, blinking hard. The dance was just what? Pity? Impulse? Dorian returned to the bench, but didn't sit. Foolish impulse. I thought one dance, one moment of dignity for you, and I could disappear before anyone noticed. But House Corvin has watchers everywhere. They saw. They assumed you were important to me. And now I'm a target because you felt sorry for me. Bitterness flooded Claire's mouth. Perfect. That's just perfect. I don't feel sorry for you. His voice was sharp enough to cut. Pity is for the weak. You walked into a room full of people who wanted to see you break, and you didn't give them the satisfaction. That's not weakness. That's steel. Clara met his eyes, startled by the intensity. There, for a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, charged with something she didn't have words for. What happens now? She asked finally. You said I can't go home. So what, I just stay here? Hide? For tonight, yes. Tomorrow we'll decide. Next steps. Dorian gestured toward a narrow staircase she hadn't noticed before, tucked into the corner. There's a room upstairs. Clean bed. Locked door. You'll be safe. Safe with vampires all around me? Safer than out there with Corvin's hunters tracking your scent through the streets. He paused. And safer than going back to an apartment they've already found. Cold washed over Clara's skin. They know where I live? By now? Almost certainly. Dorian's expression was grim. They're efficient, brutal. They won't stop until they understand what you mean to me. But I don't mean anything to you. We just met. They don't know that. He moved toward the staircase, clearly expecting her to follow. Come. Dawn is still hours away, but you need rest. You're running on fear and adrenaline, and both will fail you soon. Clara stood on shaking legs. Her mind was a chaos of impossible information, terror, and something else, a strange, reckless curiosity. She should be hysterical. She should be demanding he let her go. Consequences be damned. Instead, she found herself asking, "How old are you?" Dorian paused at the base of the stairs, his hand on the worn railing. When he looked back at her, something ancient and alone flickered behind his eyes. Old enough to have made many mistakes, he said quietly. And to know this is another one. What is? Caring whether you survive the night. Then he climbed the stairs, leaving Clara to follow or flee. She looked at the door unlocked, unguarded. She could run. Try her luck on the streets. Maybe reach her apartment before Corvin's hunters found her. Maybe. Clara's hand went to her temple, felt the tender bruise where her head had hit the wall. Remembered the rough hands, the fear, the certainty that she was about to be hurt in ways she couldn't name. She looked up the dark staircase where Dorian had disappeared, then she followed. Chapter 4. The room upstairs. The staircase was narrow and steep, the kind that belonged to buildings built when space was precious and people were smaller. Clara kept one hand on the cool stone wall as she climbed, her footsteps echoing softly. Above her, Dorian moved with that unnatural silence, barely disturbing the air. The hallway at the top was dimly lit by wall sconces that cast long shadows across faded wallpaper. Doors lined both sides, some closed, some slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of rooms beyond. Clara heard sounds behind some of them, murmured conversation, the turning of pages, something that might have been breathing but felt wrong in its rhythm. Dorian stopped at the last door on the right. This one. He opened it to reveal a small but surprisingly comfortable room. A narrow bed with clean linens, a washstand with a porcelain basin, a single window covered by heavy curtains. The walls were bare except for old plaster, but everything was tidy, dust-free, as though someone still cared for this space despite its emptiness. Whose room is this? Clara asked, hovering at the threshold. Mine. At her sharp look, he added, I don't use it. Haven't for years. I prefer, he gestured vaguely. Other arrangements. Clara stepped inside, hyper-aware of him behind her, filling the doorway with his presence. The room smelled faintly of old paper and that same mineral coldness that seemed to follow him. She turned to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. The door locks from the inside, he said. No one will disturb you without permission. Not even me. Where will you be? Nearby. He pulled the door key from his pocket and set it on the small table beside the bed. If you need anything. There's a bell pulled by the headboard. Someone will come. Someone, Clara repeated. You mean another vampire? Yes. He said it simply, without apology. We're not all monsters, Clara. Some of us remember what it was like to be mortal, to be vulnerable. She wanted to ask how long ago that had been for him, but exhaustion was creeping in at the edges of her awareness. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness that made her limbs feel heavy. She sank onto the edge of the bed. Why are you doing this? The question came out softer than she'd intended. Really, not the political reasons, or the house wars. Why protect me? Dorian was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. He stood framed in the doorway, one hand resting against the frame. His gray eyes fixed on some middle distance. 300 years ago, he finally said, I watched someone die because I was too arrogant to see danger coming, too convinced of my own power to notice the trap closing around her. His voice was flat, carefully emotionless. She was mortal, under my protection, and I failed her. Clara's breath caught. What happened? Rival house. They took her to punish me for a territorial dispute. I barely remember now. His jaw tightened. By the time I found her, it was too late. And I've spent 3 centuries telling myself it was a lesson learned, that I'd never be that careless again. But tonight I was careless. He looked at her then, and the weight of his gaze made her chest ache. I saw you sitting there, and I acted on impulse instead of strategy. And now you're paying the price for my momentary lapse in judgment. Clara stood, moved closer to him. She should be afraid. Every rational part of her screamed that she was standing in a room with a predator who'd just admitted to being centuries old and responsible for someone's death. But all she could see was the grief in his eyes, ancient and unhealed. She must have been important to you, Clara said quietly. She was. Dorian's hand fell from the doorframe. She was light in a world that had grown very dark. And I destroyed her by being selfish enough to think I could keep her safe in my world. Is that what you think you're doing with me? Repeating a mistake? I know I am. His voice turned hard. The smart thing would be to wipe your memory of tonight and leave you somewhere safe. Let House Corvin believe you were nothing but a momentary distraction. You'd wake tomorrow thinking you'd had too much champagne and a vivid dream. Clara's skin went cold. You can do that? Erase memories? Yes. He watched her process that, saw the fear flicker across her face. But I won't. Not without your permission. Why not? If it would keep me safe because you deserve to know the truth of what's happening to you. What's out there in the dark? He stepped into the room, and Clara had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Because you've already had your choices stolen by people who claim to love you. I won't do the same. The reference to her ex-fiancé, to the betrayal that had brought her to that wedding, hit harder than it should have. Clara felt tears threaten and blinked them back furiously. You don't know anything about that. I know you trusted someone who didn't deserve it. I know. They took your future and gave it to someone else. And I know you're still standing despite it. His voice softened. That takes strength most people never find. Mortal or immortal. Clara looked away, unable to hold his gaze any longer. I don't feel strong. I feel like I've been drowning for months. And tonight just her voice cracked. Tonight I thought maybe I'd finally hit bottom. But apparently there are deeper waters. There are always deeper waters. Dorian reached out, then stopped, his hand hovering near her shoulder. But you don't have to swim them alone. Not tonight. She looked at his hand, pale, steady, not quite touching her. Is this how it started with her? The woman you lost? His hand dropped. No, she was braver than you. Foolish enough to fall in love with a monster. And you? Clara asked. Did you love her? I thought I did. Dorian moved back toward the door, putting distance between them. But I've learned that what I felt was possession disguised as affection. I wanted to keep her like a bright thing in a cage. I called it protection, called it love. His expression was bleak. She knew better. She tried to leave. That's when they took her. The silence that fell was heavy with old grief and new understanding. Claire wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold, despite the room's stuffiness. I won't make you stay, Dorian said quietly. Tomorrow, if you want to leave, I'll help you disappear. New city, new name, enough money to start over. House Corvin will lose interest eventually if they can't find you. And if I don't want to run? His eyes snapped to hers, sharp and searching. Then you're a fool, maybe. Clara lifted her chin. But I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting other people's choices shape my life. My fiancé chose my sister. My sister chose to betray me. Those men tonight chose to hunt me. She took a breath. What if I choose to stay? To understand this world you're part of. You don't know what you're asking. Then teach me. The words came out stronger than she felt. You said you recognized something in me. That I had nothing left to lose. She held his gaze. What if that makes me dangerous instead of vulnerable? Dorian stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, rough sound that held more surprise than humor. You're either very brave or very broken. Can't I be both? His smile faded, replaced by something that looked almost like respect. Get some rest, Clara. We'll talk more after dark tomorrow. You're exhausted. And exhaustion makes people say things they don't mean. I mean it. We'll see. He stepped into the hallway, then paused. Lock the door. Trust no one who comes to it except me. And if anyone tries to enter without permission, use the bell pull. I know. Clara moved toward the door, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. She could see the fine texture of his coat, smell something like cold stone and old books. Dorian? Yes? Thank you. For tonight. For she gestured helplessly. For not letting me face this alone. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Sleep well, Clara. What's coming will require all your strength. Then he was gone, the hallway, swallowing him with barely a sound. Clara closed the door, turned the heavy lock, and leaned against the wood. Her heart was racing again, but not from fear this time, from something more dangerous: choice. Chapter 5. What moves in daylight? Clara woke to silence so complete it felt like pressure against her eardrums. For a disoriented moment, she didn't remember where she was. The bed was too narrow, the ceiling too high, the light filtering through heavy curtains too dim and gray. Then memory crashed back: the wedding, the attack, Dorian's cold hands, and colder revelations: vampires. She'd spent the night in a building full of vampires. Clara sat up slowly, her body protesting. Her dress was wrinkled, her hair a disaster, and her head still ached where it had hit the wall. But she was alive, whole. The door was still locked from the inside, undisturbed. She moved to the window and carefully pulled back one curtain. Daylight, weak and overcast, but unmistakably day. The street below was nearly empty, a few pedestrians hurrying past with umbrellas. A delivery wagon creaking over cobblestones. Normal, achingly normal after the strangeness of last night. Clara's hand trembled against the curtain fabric. She could leave now, while they slept. While Dorian and whatever other creatures lived in this building were helpless in their day sleep. She could walk out into that gray morning and disappear into the city, just as he'd suggested. But then what? Return to her apartment? That house Corvin had already found? Hide in a hotel under a false name, with no money and no plan? Run to another city where she knew no one and hope the vampires lost interest? Or stay, learn, choose? The thought was insane. It was also the first thing in months that had made her feel anything other than numb. Clara let the curtain fall and turned back to the room. Someone had left a tray outside her door while she slept. She found it when she unlocked the door and peered into the hallway. Fresh bread, cheese, an apple, and a pot of tea that was somehow still warm despite the heavy silence that filled the building. A note in elegant handwriting read, "Eat. You'll need your strength." Desha brought the tray inside and ate mechanically, her mind racing through everything Dorian had told her. Vampire houses, territorial disputes, blood politics. A world that existed alongside hers, invisible and ancient, with rules she didn't understand. And somewhere in that world, House Corvin believed she mattered to Dorian. Believed she was leverage, a weakness, something to be exploited. Clara set down her teacup with a sharp click. Her whole life, she'd been someone's something. Her parents' dutiful daughter. Her fianki's respectable bride-to-be. Her sister's convenient rival. Even last night at the wedding, she'd been the scorned woman, the pitiful figure everyone could gossip about and secretly feel superior to. What if, for once, she was something on her own terms? The idea was terrifying. It was also intoxicating. Clara stood and moved to the washstand. The water in the pitcher was cold, but clean. She washed her face, tried to fix her hair with shaking fingers, and studied her reflection in the small mirror above the basin. The woman, looking back, was pale, bruised, disheveled, and alive in a way she hadn't been in months. A soft sound made her freeze: footsteps in the hallway. Too light to be human, too deliberate to be accidental. They stopped outside her door. Clara's heart hammered. Dorian had said they'd sleep during the day. Had he been wrong? Or was this something else? A gentle knock, then a voice, female and cultured. "Miss Clara? I'm not here to harm you. Dorian asked me to check on you before the sun fully set, before the sunset." Clara glanced at the window. The light was already fading, the gray afternoon bleeding toward evening. How long had she slept? "Who are you?" Clara called through the door. "My name is Isabeau. I live on this floor." A pause. "I'm like Dorian, but I'm also a physician. He mentioned you'd been injured." Clara hesitated, hand on the lock. "He said no one would disturb me, and no one has until now. But night comes early this time of year, and Dorian will wake soon. He'll want to know you're well." The voice was patient, almost amused. "I promise I'm far less dangerous than what waits outside these walls." Less dangerous didn't mean safe, but Clara's curiosity was stronger than her fear. She unlocked the door and opened it a crack. The woman in the hallway was striking: dark skin, silver gray hair cropped short, eyes that gleamed amber in the dim light. She wore modern clothes, a simple blouse and skirt, and carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who'd long since stopped worrying about threats. When she smiled, Clara saw the same two sharp canines Dorian had revealed. "May I?" Isabeau gestured to the room. Clara stepped back, letting her enter. Isabeau moved with that same fluid grace all the vampires seemed to possess. But there was something warmer about her presence. less predatory, or perhaps just better disguised. Let me see your head, Isabeau said, setting a small leather bag on the table. Dorian mentioned you hid it during the attack. Clara sat on the bed, allowing the examination. Isabeau's fingers were cool but gentle as they probed the bruise at her temple. Up close, she smelled of lavender and something medicinal. You'll live, Isabeau pronounced. The headache should fade by tomorrow. Your lucky mortal skulls are remarkably fragile. She stepped back, studying Clara with open curiosity. You're handling this better than most would. Handling what? Learning monsters are real or being trapped in a building full of them. Isabeau's laugh was genuine. Both. Most mortals either faint or go hysterical. You're remarkable composed. I'm terrified, Clara admitted. I'm just too tired to show it properly, honest. I like that. Isabeau moved to the window, checking the curtains with practiced efficiency. Dorian needs more honesty in his life. He's been alone too long, carrying too much guilt. He told you about me? He told me he'd made a mistake that put a mortal in danger. That's all I needed to hear, to know it was eating at him. Isabeau turned back to Clara. He doesn't usually interfere in mortal affairs. The fact that he did that he brought you here means something. It means he felt guilty about a woman who died 3 centuries ago. Perhaps, Isabeau's amber eyes were knowing. Or perhaps he saw something in you that reminded him why he used to care about mortals at all. Before grief made him careful. Before loss taught him distance. Clara felt heat in her cheeks. We're not, I know. But you could be. Isabeau collected her bag. If you're brave enough. If he's brave enough. She moved toward the door, then paused. A word of advice, Miss Clara? Dorian will try to protect you by pushing you away. It's what he does. It's what he's done for centuries. Don't let him. Why are you telling me this? Because I've watched him exist for 200 years without truly living. And I think, Isabeau smiled slightly. I think you might be the kind of mortal who fights back. Before Clara could respond, Isabeau was gone, the door, clicking softly shut behind her. Clara sat in the growing darkness, processing. The building around her was waking, she could hear it now. Subtle sounds of movement, of voices, of life that wasn't quite life. The vampires were rising with the night, which meant Dorian would come soon. Clara stood and moved to the mirror, straightening her ruined dress as best she could. She looked like she'd been through a war. Perhaps she had. The old Clara would have hidden, would have made herself small and waited to be told what to do. But the old Clara had been broken by people she trusted. This Clara, the one staring back from the mirror with bruised skin and defiant eyes, was done being broken by anyone. When the knock came at her door 20 minutes later, she was ready. Come in, she called. The door opened. Dorian stood in the threshold, dressed differently now, simple dark shirt and trousers, his hair slightly disheveled as though he'd just woken. His gray eyes found hers immediately, searching. You're still here, he said. It wasn't quite a question. I'm still here, Clara confirmed. Something passed across his face, relief, perhaps, or concern. We need to talk. House Corvin sent a message. Clara's stomach dropped. What kind of message? Dorian's expression went cold. Dangerous. The kind written in blood. Chapter 6. Blood Oaths and Broken Triades. Dorian led Clara down to a different room on the ground floor, larger than where she'd first entered, with high ceilings and walls lined with books that looked older than any library she'd ever seen. A massive table dominated the center, its surface scarred with age and what might have been burn marks or claw marks. 3 other vampires waited there. Isabeau stood by the window, arms crossed. Beside her was a tall man with copper hair and eyes like green glass, wearing clothes that looked vaguely military. And at the head of the table sat an ancient-looking woman, though ancient felt wrong for someone whose face was unlined. It was her eyes that were old, dark, and fathomless as deep water. Clara, Dorian said quietly, this is the council of this house. Isabeau, you've met. The man is Marcus, our strategist. And this, he gestured to the woman, was something that might have been respect or wariness. This is eldest Sibylla. She's ruled this house for 9 centuries. 9 centuries. Clara's mind stuttered over the number. The woman watching her had been alive when medieval churches were being built, when knights rode to crusades, when the world was fundamentally different. Sit, Sibylla said. Her voice was surprisingly soft, barely above a whisper, but it carried absolute authority. Clara sat. Dorian remained standing beside her, his presence solid and somehow reassuring despite everything. Show her. Sibylla said. Marcus stepped forward and placed something on the table in front of Clara. It took her a moment to understand what she was seeing, a piece of pale fabric, possibly silk. Stained? Dark red. No, not stained. Painted. The symbols drawn in blood were deliberate, precise, forming patterns that hurt to look at too directly. This was nailed to our door at sunset, Marcus said. His accent was British, his tone clipped. A challenge banner. House Corvin is declaring formal grievance against me. Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Against Dorian, for interfering in their hunt. Isabeau moved closer to the table. The mortal they were tracking you is now considered contested territory. They're demanding either your surrender or formal negotiation. Negotiation for what? For your life, Dorian said flatly. For the right to question you about your connection to me. To determine if you hold information valuable to their interests. Clara's stomach churned. What would they do to me? The silence that followed was answer enough. They're not gentle with mortals, Isabeau said finally. Especially not ones they believe are hiding something. But I'm not hiding anything. I don't know anything about vampire politics, or they won't believe that. Marcus's green eyes were sharp, calculating. You danced with Dorian at a public event. You came here willingly. From their perspective, you're either his informant, his lover, or his blood servant. Any of those positions would make you valuable for interrogation. The casual way he said interrogation made Clara's skin crawl. So what happens now? Sibylla leaned forward slightly, studying Clara with unsettling intensity. Now we decide if you're worth starting a war over. The words hit like a slap. Clara looked at Dorian, who'd gone very still beside her. She's under my protection, he said, his voice carefully controlled. That should be answer enough. Your protection means nothing if the house won't support it. Sibylla's gaze never left Clara. We've held peace with Corvin for 70 years. Fragile peace, yes, but peace nonetheless. Breaking it over a mortal, she paused. We need to understand what makes this one different. She's not different. She's innocent. She stumbled into something through no fault of her own. Because of you. Marcus's tone was sharp. Because you made an impulsive decision at a mortal wedding. Now we're all paying for your momentary lapse in judgment. Dorian's hands clenched at his sides. Clara could feel the tension radiating off him, could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. I'll accept responsibility. Let me negotiate with Corvin directly. Offer them what? Sibylla interrupted. Territory? Information? Your servitude? She shook her head slowly. Corvin doesn't want appeasement. They want to test our strength. They've been looking for an excuse to press boundaries for decades. This mortal is just the excuse they needed. Clara's mind raced. She was the excuse. The catalyst for a war between creatures who'd lived for centuries, who had power and history she couldn't comprehend. Part of her wanted to run screaming. But another part, the part that had survived betrayal and public humiliation, was analyzing, calculating. What if I went to them? She heard herself say. Every eye in the room snapped to her. Absolutely not, Dorian said immediately. Clara ignored him, focusing on Sibylla. You said they want to question me, to determine if I'm valuable. What if I gave myself up, proved I know nothing, and they lost interest? They'd kill you, Isabeau said bluntly. Or worse. Corvin doesn't release mortals who've seen too much. But if I'm not valuable, you're already valuable simply by being here. Marcus gestured around the room. You've seen our sanctuary, met our council. Even if you know nothing strategic, you know too much to be set free. Clara felt the trap closing around her. So I'm what? A prisoner here? Or a prisoner there? You're protected here, Dorian said, his voice tight. There's a difference. Is there? Clara stood, her chair scraping against stone. Because from where I'm sitting, I've traded one cage for another. At least with my ex-fiancé, I knew what the bars looked like. The comparison clearly hit its mark. Dorian flinched as though she'd struck him. Sibylla made a sound that might have been amusement. She has spirit. I'll grant her that. The ancient vampire rose, moving with liquid grace toward Clara. Up close, her presence was overwhelming, centuries of power compressed into a deceptively small frame. Tell me, child, why did you come to that wedding? Knowing you'd be humiliated, knowing they'd tear you apart. Clara lifted her chin. Because I was tired of hiding. Tired of letting other people's choices define me. And now, knowing what you know about what exists in the darkness, are you tired of hiding from us too? The question hung in the air like a blade. Clara could feel everyone watching, waiting. She thought about the locked room upstairs. About Dorian's careful distance and guilty eyes. About spending her life running from shadows, always afraid, always small. Yes, she said quietly. I'm tired of all of it. Sibylla's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Interesting. She turned to Dorian. Your mortal has courage. Perhaps she's worth the trouble after all. She's not my mortal, Dorian said tightly. No? Sibylla's dark eyes gleamed. Then you won't object if I propose an alternative solution. Dread pooled in Clara's stomach. What solution? A blood oath, Sibylla said simply. Between you and Dorian. Formal, binding, witnessed by this council. It would make his protection official, recognized by all houses under the old laws. Even Corvin would have to acknowledge it. What does that mean? Clara looked between them. A blood oath. Isabeau stepped forward. It means Dorian would take responsibility for you completely. Your actions become his actions. Your safety becomes his honor. If you betray the house, he pays the price. If he fails to protect you, he faces judgment. It's essentially bondage, Marcus added. Not slavery, but close. You'd belong to this house, under Dorian's guardianship, for as long as the oath holds. How long is that? Until death, Sibylla said. Yours or his. Though given the disparity in lifespans, she shrugged elegantly. It would likely be yours. Clara felt Dorian move closer, felt the cold radiating off him. No, absolutely not. I won't bind her like that. Then what do you suggest? Sibylla's voice hardened. Let Corvin take her? Watch them break her to find secrets she doesn't have? Or start a war that will cost mortal and immortal lives alike? There has to be another way, there isn't. Sibylla's patience was clearly wearing thin. This is the law, Dorian. You invoked protection. Now you must make it official, or release your claim entirely. Clara's pulse hammered in her ears. A blood oath, binding herself to Dorian, to this house, to a world of shadows and ancient laws. It was insane. It was everything she should refuse. It was also a choice. Her choice. What would it involve? She asked quietly. The oath? Clara, don't, Dorian started. What would it involve? Sibylla's expression was unreadable. A ritual. Blood shared, words spoken, witnessed, and sealed. You would feel the Bonda awareness of him, always. Where he is, whether he's in danger, he would feel the same for you. It's intimate, permanent, not something to undertake lightly. And I'd be safe? From Corvin? As safe as any of us. The oath would mark you as house property. Corvin would have to challenge Dorian directly to take you, which would mean formal combat. They won't risk it over a mortal. Sibylla paused. Probably. Clara almost laughed. Nothing was certain. Nothing was safe. Just different shades of danger. She looked at Dorian. His face was carefully blank, but his eyes betrayed him guilt and something else. Fear, maybe. Fear of binding her the way he'd once tried to cage someone else. If I say yes, Clara said slowly, I need one condition. Sibylla raised an eyebrow. You're hardly in a position to negotiate. One condition, Clara repeated, holding Dorian's gaze. This oath makes me his responsibility, but not his property. I keep my autonomy, my choices, my freedom within these walls. That's not how Marcus began. That's my condition, Clara interrupted. Take it, or I walk out that door right now and let Corvin find me. At least then only I pay the price for tonight's mistakes. The room went silent. Dorian stared at her like he'd never seen her before. Finally, Sibylla laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and approval. Done. The oath will be sworn with autonomy intact. Though I suspect, child, you'll find true freedom is more complicated than you think. It always is, Clara said. When do we do this? Tonight, Sibylla said. Before Corvin loses patience. She looked at Dorian. Prepare her. And Dorian? Try not to make this one fall in love with you. We both know how poorly that ends. Chapter 7. The ritual of binding. Dorian took Clara to a room she hadn't seen before, smaller, circular, with walls of bare stone that looked older than the building itself. Candles burned in iron sconces, casting flickering shadows that made the space feel alive. In the center stood a low table carved with symbols that hurt her eyes when she tried to focus on them. This is the oath chamber, Dorian said quietly, closing the door behind them. Every formal binding in this house has happened here for 6 centuries. Clara moved to the table, running her fingers along the carved edge. The stone was cold, smooth from countless hands before hers. How many mortals have stood here? Not many. Most oaths are between vampires. He hesitated. The last mortal binding was 70 years ago. It didn't end well. What happened? The mortal broke faith, betrayed house secrets to hunters. Dorian's voice was flat. The vampire who'd sworn to protect her had to execute her himself. It's the law. Betrayal by the bound is paid by the binder's hand. Clara's stomach twisted. You'd have to kill me? Yes. He met her eyes. Which is why you need to understand what you're agreeing to. This isn't symbolic, Clara. The blood oath creates a real connection. You'll feel me, my location, my emotional state, whether I'm injured or in danger. I'll feel the same from you. It's invasive, constant. There's no privacy, no distance. For how long? Until one of us dies. He moved closer, and she could see the tension in every line of his body. I need you to think about that. Really think. You're mortal. You have perhaps 60 years left if you're lucky. I have, he gestured helplessly. Centuries. Millennia, possibly. You'd be bound to me for your entire life. Every relationship you have, every choice you make, I'd be there in the background. Aware, present. Clara absorbed that. And you? How would it feel for you, knowing I'd age and die while you stayed the same? Something pained crossed his face. Like watching a candle burn down. Beautiful and inevitable and unbearable. He turned away. I've done it before, Clara. Watched mortals I cared about grow old and fade. It doesn't get easier. Then why agree to this? Because the alternative is worse. His voice was rough. Corvin would destroy you, slowly, and I'd know I could have prevented it. He looked back at her. At least this way, you have a chance. You're protected, housed, fed. You can build a life here, even if it's not the one you imagined. A gilded cage, perhaps. But a cage with an open door. He gestured to the chamber door. Sibylla agreed to your condition. You'll have autonomy within these walls. Freedom to come and go during daylight hours. The oath binds me to protect you, not to control you. But you'd always know where I was. What I was feeling, yes. He said it simply, honestly. I'd be lying if I said that wouldn't be difficult. For both of us. Clara moved around the table, thinking. The old her would have run by now. Would have found this entire situation too strange, too dangerous, too far outside the safe boundaries of normal life. But the old her had been engaged to a man who'd chosen her sister, had trusted people who'd betrayed her, had played by society's rules and still lost everything. What did she really have to lose now? Teach me the ritual, she said. Tell me what happens. Dorian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He moved to the table and touched the carved symbols. The oath is ancient. Older than any house, older than most laws we follow. Now, it was designed to bind warriors before battle, to ensure loyalty when death was close, romantic, Clara said dryly, his mouth twitched. Vampires aren't known for romance. We're known for survival. He traced one of the symbols. The ritual requires blood from both parties mixed and consecrated with words of binding. I'll cut your palm shallow, barely painful, then mine. We clasp hands, let the blood mingle, and speak the oath. What words? They're an old seal, a language dead for 1,000 years. But the meaning is simple. I bind my blood to yours, my life to yours, my honor to yours. What harms you, harms me. What you betray, I answer for. Until death parts us, we are one house, one bond, one oath. Clara shivered at the finality of it. And then Sibylla and the council witness. The bond takes hold, you'll feel it immediately, like a thread connecting us. After that, you're marked. Any vampire will sense it on you. You'll smell like me, like this house. Corvin won't touch you without declaring war. And if they do declare war, then we fight. Dorian's eyes were cold, ancient. And we win, or we die. Those are the only options. A knock interrupted them. Isabeau entered, carrying a wooden box and a length of white silk. Sibylla's ready. The council's assembled. She set the items on the table and looked at Clara with something like sympathy. Last chance to run, girl. No one here will think less of you. Clara straightened her spine. I'm not running. Good. Isabeau smiled slightly. You'll fit in better than you think. She left, the door closing softly behind her. Dorian opened the wooden box, revealing a silver knife with a blade that looked impossibly sharp. The handle was wrapped in leather, worn smooth from countless hands. Ready? Clara's heart hammered. No, but do it anyway. He almost smiled. That's perhaps the most honest thing anyone's said to me in decades. He picked up the knife, testing its edge. Give me your hand. Clara extended her right hand, palm up. It trembled slightly. Dorian caught her wrist, steadying her, and she felt that cold that radiated from him. His gray eyes found hers. "This will hurt," he warned. "Everything hurts eventually," Clara said. "At least this time I'm choosing it." Something flickered in his expression, respect, maybe, or recognition. He placed the blade against her palm, and with one swift motion, cut a clean line across her skin. Clara gasped. Pain bloomed sharp and bright, blood welling immediately. Dorian set down the knife and cut his own palm with the same efficiency. His blood was darker than hers, almost black in the candlelight. He clasped her hand, their wounds pressing together. The pain intensified, then shifted, became heat, became electricity, became something else entirely. Clara felt it spreading up her arm, into her chest, wrapping around her heart like vines. "Say the words," Dorian instructed, his voice rough. "Repeat after me. Sanguis ad sanguinum. Sanguis ad sanguinum," Clara repeated, her voice shaking. "Vita ad vitam. Vita ad vitam." The heat intensified. She could feel something forming between them, invisible but undeniable, like a rope being woven, strand by strand, connecting them at some fundamental level. "Honor ad honorem," Dorian continued. "Honor ad honorem. Usc ad mortem. Usc ad mortem." The words resonated in the chamber, echoing off stone and harmonics that shouldn't have existed. The candles flared brighter, and then Clara felt it, a sudden, overwhelming awareness of Dorian. Not just his physical presence, but his essence, his age, his power, his carefully controlled fear and guilt. And something else, something warm, buried under centuries of ice. She could feel where he was in space, relative to her. Could sense his heartbeat slow, so slow compared to hers. Could taste his emotions like ash and iron on her tongue. It was terrifying. It was intimate beyond anything she'd ever experienced, and from the look on Dorian's face, he felt the same invasion from her. His eyes had gone wide, almost shocked, as though he hadn't expected the bond to be this strong, this immediate. The door opened. Sibylla entered, followed by Marcus and Isabeau. The ancient vampire's dark eyes swept over them, taking in their clasped hands, the blood, the charged air. "It's done," she pronounced. "The oath is witnessed and sealed. Clara of No House is now Clara of House Thorn, bound to Dorian until death." She stepped forward and draped the white silk over their joined hands. "Wear this bond with honor. Break it at your peril." Clara could barely focus on the words. The awareness of Dorian was overwhelming, drowning out everything else. She could feel his surprise at the intensity, his attempt to pull back emotionally, to give her space despite the connection. She squeezed his hand tighter. "Don't," she thought. "Don't pull away." His eyes snapped to hers, and she realized with a jolt he'd heard that. Not her words, but her meaning. The intention behind the thought. "The bond settles after a few hours," Isabeau said gently, moving to help unwrap their hands. "It won't always be this intense. You'll learn to filter, to maintain boundaries." But as Clara's hand separated from Dorian's, as Isabeau cleaned and bandaged their wounds with efficient care, she wondered if boundaries were possible anymore, because she could still feel him. A constant presence at the edge of her awareness, like a flame burning in the dark, and from the way Dorian was staring at her, she knew he felt exactly the same. "Welcome to House Thorn," Sibylla said, her voice carrying dark amusement. "Try not to make us regret this." Outside, something crashed against the building's outer wall. Then came the howling. Inhuman, hungry, and far too close. Corvin had come calling. Chapter 8. The Seagoth howling rose in pitch, joined by others, until it became a chorus that made Clara's teeth ache. Through the new bond, she felt Dorian's reaction, not fear, but cold calculation and barely restrained fury. "They're testing us," Marcus said, already moving toward the door. "Seeing if we'll surrender the mortal. Now that the oath is sealed." "How many?" Sibylla's voice was calm, but her eyes had gone black, pupils swallowing the iris completely. "At least a dozen," Isabeau replied, tilting her head as though listening to something Clara couldn't hear. "Maybe more. They've surrounded the building. Front and back entrances are blocked." Dorian's hand found Clara's shoulder, pulling her closer. "Get her to the safe house." "The lower chamber." "No." Clara pulled away from his grip, ignoring the spike of alarm she felt through the bond. "I'm not hiding while you fight. You're mortal," Dorian said flatly. "You'll die if you stay here. I'm bound to you now." "That makes this my fight too." Clara's voice was steadier than she felt. "Besides, what good is the oath if I just run every time there's danger?" Another crash. Louder this time. Something heavy hit the front door, and Clara heard wood splinter. Voices shouted outside, guttural, aggressive, definitely not human. No time for debate, Sibylla snapped. She moved with sudden speed, producing weapons from hidden compartments in the walls, silver daggers, short swords, something that looked like a crossbow but more brutal. She tossed a blade to Marcus, who caught it without looking. We hold the ground floor. Don't let them reach the upper levels. The other residents aren't prepared for a siege. What about me? Clara demanded. Give me something. A weapon. Anything. Dorian looked like he wanted to argue, but Isabeau pressed a short blade into Clara's hand. Silver-edged. Aim for the throat or heart. Don't hesitate, Corvin. Vampires don't show mercy. The weight of the blade was strange in Clara's palm, heavier than she'd expected. She'd never held a weapon before, never imagined she'd need to. But through the bond, she felt Dorian's grim approval mixed with terror at the thought of her in danger. I know, she thought at him. But I'm here anyway. His jaw tightened. Stay behind me. No matter what. The front door exploded inward. 3 vampires poured through the opening, moving with that inhuman speed that made them blur. They were different from Dorian's house, leaner, with eyes that gleamed red in the candlelight and features that looked almost feral. Their clothes were dark leather and metal, functional armor rather than the elegant simplicity of House Thorn. Marcus met the first one head-on, his blade singing as it caught candlelight. Metal clashed against metal, and Clara realized the attacking vampire had claws, actual claws extending from his fingertips. Long and curved like talons, Sibylla moved like liquid shadow, appearing behind the second attacker and driving her dagger into his spine. The vampire shrieked, a sound that scraped against Clara's eardrums, before dissolving into ash that scattered across the stone floor. They can die, Clara thought, with a mixture of relief and horror. They're not invincible. The third vampire spotted Clara and smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. There she is, the little mortal who's caused so much trouble. Dorian stepped between them, his own blade appearing from somewhere inside his coat. You'll have to go through me first. That's the idea. The vampire lunged. What followed was too fast for Clara to fully process. Dorian and the attacker became a whirlwind of movement, blades flashing, bodies twisting in ways that defied physics. Clara pressed herself against the wall, gripping her own weapon, trying to stay out of the way while keeping Dorian in sight. Through the bond, she felt every near miss, every moment of strain. It was disorienting, overwhelming, her fear mixing with his focused aggression until she couldn't tell where her emotions ended and his began. More vampires crashed through the broken doorway. Isabeau met 2 of them, her movements precise and economical, but they were outnumbered. For every attacker they dropped, 2 more seemed to appear. A vampire broke through the defensive line, heading straight for the hallway that led to the upper floors. Clara moved without thinking, throwing herself into his path. The vampire skidded to a stop, surprised, then laughed. Brave little mortal. Stupid but brave. He reached for her. Clara slashed with the silver blade, catching his forearm. The vampire screamed. The silver clearly hurt worse than normal metal and stumbled back. But his other hand lashed out, catching Clara across the face and sending her sprawling. Pain exploded across her cheek. She tasted blood. Through the bond, she felt Dorian's reaction, pure, incandescent rage that made the connection between them flare white hot. Dorian appeared over her in an instant, moving faster than she'd ever seen. His blade took the attacking vampire's head clean off. More ash scattered. Clara. Dorian's hands were on her face, checking the damage. I'm fine. Clara pushed herself upright, ignoring the way the room spun. Her cheek throbbed, but nothing felt broken. Behind you. Dorian spun, blade rising to block another attack. Clara scrambled to her feet, retrieving her dropped weapon. The bond was a constant scream, now. Feeding her information, she didn't know how to process Dorian's position, his pain levels, his desperate need to keep her safe while fighting off multiple attackers. I'm okay. She projected through the bond, hoping he could feel it. Focus on them, not me. She felt his resistance, his instinct to protect her above all else. But he trusted her enough to listen, turning his full attention back to the fight. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Clara stayed mobile, dodging more than fighting, using her small size and mortal unpredictability to her advantage. When another vampire came at her, she remembered her ballroom training, the footwork, the grace, and used it to dodge, to weave, to stay alive. she managed one more solid hit, driving her blade into a vampire's shoulder when he was distracted by Isabeau. The silver made him scream and retreat, giving Isabeau the opening she needed to finish him. Finally, the tide turned. The attackers realized they were losing more than they were gaining. One by one, they retreated, disappearing into the night with hisses of frustration. Sibylla stood at the broken doorway, her clothes torn and her blade dripping dark blood. They'll be back. This was just a test seeing our strength, our willingness to defend her. We need better defenses, Marcus said, examining a wound on his arm. They found us too easily. Or we had a traitor, Isabeau added quietly. Someone told Corvin exactly where and when to strike. The implication hung in the air. Clara felt Dorian's suspicion through the bond, his mind already calculating who might have betrayed them. Later, Sibylla commanded, "First we secure the building and tend the wounded." Clara, the ancient vampire's dark eyes found her. "You fought, clumsily, but you fought. That's more than most mortals manage in their first siege." Clara's legs chose that moment to give out. She sat down hard on the floor, her whole body shaking with delayed shock. The silver blade clattered from her nerveless fingers. Dorian was beside her immediately, his cold hands steadying her. Through the bond, she felt his relief so strong it nearly choked her. He'd been terrified, absolutely terrified that she'd die in front of him just hours after binding herself to him. "I'm alive," Clara whispered. "We're both alive, barely." His voice was rough. He touched her injured cheek with infinite gentleness. "You shouldn't have fought. You should have run." "And go where?" Clara managed a weak laugh. "I'm bound to you now, remember? Running would just delay the inevitable. You saved the upper levels," Isabeau said, crouching beside them. "That vampire you stopped would have slaughtered the residents upstairs. They're not fighters, scholars, artists, the old ones who've withdrawn from house politics." She pressed a clean cloth into Clara's hand. "You have our gratitude." Clara dabbed at her bleeding cheek, wincing. "I didn't think. I just moved. Instinct," Sibylla observed. "Good instinct. You might survive this after all, mortal." She turned to Marcus. "Double the watch. Seal the lower windows. And find out who told Corvin we'd be conducting a binding ritual tonight." As the council dispersed to handle the aftermath, Dorian helped Clara to her feet. His arms stayed around her waist, supporting her weight. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's get you cleaned up." Clara let him guide her through the damaged hallway, stepping over debris and ash. Through the bond, she felt his emotions, guilt, fear, and underneath it all, something that felt dangerously close to pride. "You were magnificent." She felt more than heard. "I was terrified," she projected back. "That too." A pause then. "Thank you for protecting my house." "Our house," Clara corrected. "That's what the oath means, right?" She felt his surprise, then something warm and unexpected flooding through the bond. "Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of it." "Our house," Dorian repeated aloud, his voice soft. "Yes, I suppose it is." Above them, the building settled into watchful silence. Outside, Clara knew Corvin was regrouping, planning their next move. But for now, in this moment, she was alive, bound, protected, and for the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, even if that place was the center of a vampire war. Chapter 9. The quiet between storms. Dorian's private chambers were nothing like Clara had imagined. She'd expected gothic opulence, velvet and dark wood, coffins and candelabras. Instead, the space was almost Spartan. Bare stone walls lined with books, a simple desk covered in papers and maps, a single chair by an empty fireplace. No bed. Of course no bed. He didn't sleep the way mortals did. "Sit," Dorian said, guiding her to the chair. He moved to a cabinet and retrieved supplies: clean cloth, water, something in a dark bottle that smelled medicinal. Clara sat, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Her cheek throbbed. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. And through the bond, she could feel Dorian's carefully controlled panic as he assessed her injuries. "It's not that bad," she said. "You're bleeding." He knelt before her, tilting her face toward the lamplight. His touch was gentle despite the tension radiating through him. "He could have killed you. 1 inch to the left and his claws would have hit your throat, but they didn't. This time." Dorian's jaw tightened. He dampened the cloth and began cleaning her cheek with movements so careful they barely registered as touch. "Next time you might not be so lucky. Then teach me." Clara caught his wrist, stopping him mid-motion. If there's going to be a next time, and we both know there will be, teach me how to fight properly, how to survive in your world. You shouldn't have to survive in my world. You should be safe, far from all of this. But even as he said it, Clara felt his resignation through the bond. They both knew safe wasn't an option anymore. Too late for that. She released his wrist, letting him continue his ministrations. The moment I walked into that wedding, the moment you danced with me, we crossed a line. There's no going back. Dorian was silent, focusing on cleaning the wound. It stung less than she'd expected. The medicine he applied cool against her skin. Up close like this, she could study his face, the sharp planes that would have been harsh on anyone else but somehow worked on him. The gray eyes that held centuries of experiences she couldn't imagine. The mouth that rarely smiled, but softened slightly when he was worried. Like now. Tell me about her, Clara said quietly. The woman you lost 300 years ago. Dorian's hands stilled. Through the bond, she felt his instinctive retreat, the walls slamming up to protect old wounds. Why? Because I can feel you comparing me to her. Every time I do something brave or stupid, there's this. Clara gestured helplessly. This echo through the bond. Like you're seeing her in me. He resumed, bandaging her cheek, but his movements had grown mechanical. Her name was Marguerite. She was a seamstress mortal, with a laugh that could fill a room. His voice was distant, remembering. I met her in Paris during a particularly vicious territory dispute. She made the mistake of witnessing something she shouldn't have, a killing that I'd ordered. You were going to kill her? I should have. That was the law then, as it is now. Mortals who see too much can't be allowed to spread word of our existence. He secured the bandage with a final gentle press. But she didn't run, didn't scream. She looked at the body, then at me, and said, I suppose you have your reasons. Clara could picture it, a mortal woman facing down a vampire, choosing curiosity over terror. So you let her live. I let her live. Told myself I'd watch her, make sure she kept silent. Instead, he stood abruptly, moving to the window. Instead, I became obsessed. Started visiting her shop, talking to her. She had this way of seeing the world, this bright optimism, despite living in poverty. It was addictive. You fell in love with her. I told myself it was love. Dorian's reflection in the window glass looked haunted. But love doesn't cage, doesn't isolate. I kept her to myself, didn't let her have mortal friends, convinced myself I was protecting her from my enemies. In reality, I was just collecting her, like a beautiful object I could take out and admire. Clara felt the self-loathing through the bond, thick and caustic. What happened? She tried to leave, packed a bag one night while I was dealing with house business. I came back to find her gone, his hand pressed against the window, fingers splayed. I tracked her, of course. Found her at a coaching house, trying to buy passage to Lyon, and instead of letting her go, I brought her back, locked her in my apartments, told her it was for her own safety, and your enemies found out, within a week. They took her from my own home while I slept. His voice had gone hollow. Left me a note written in her blood. By the time I found where they'd taken her, he stopped. They'd hurt her, badly. She was still alive, barely, and she looked at me with such betrayal. Not at them, at me. Because I'd made her a prisoner first. Clara's throat tightened. Through the bond, she could feel the weight of his guilt, 3 centuries old and still fresh. I'm sorry. I killed them all. Every member of that house, down to the youngest. Burned their sanctuary and salted the earth. Dorian turned from the window, his eyes distant. And then I swore I'd never bind myself to another mortal. Never put someone in that position again. Yet here we are. Clara stood, moving toward him. The bond hummed between them, that constant awareness that made privacy impossible. Bound, connected. This is different. The oath was necessary for your survival, was it? Clara interrupted. Or did you see a chance to protect someone again? To maybe redeem yourself for what happened to Marguerite? Dorian flinched as though she'd struck him. Don't what? See the truth? Clara stopped in front of him, close enough to feel the unnatural cold radiating from his body. I can feel you through this bond, Dorian. I can feel your guilt, your fear that you're repeating the same mistakes. But I'm not Marguerite. No, you're more reckless. But there was no heat in the words, maybe. But I'm also choosing this. Choosing to stay, to learn, to fight. Clara reached up, touching the bandage on her cheek. She tried to run because you gave her no choice. I'm staying because you gave me one. Something shifted in his expression, surprise mixed with something that felt like relief through the bond. You really mean that? I really do. Clara managed a small smile. Though I reserve the right to change my mind if you turn out to be insufferably controlling, I'll try to restrain myself. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, almost a smile. Though I make no promises when Corvin attacks again. When, not if. When, Dorian confirmed. Tonight was just a test. They'll come back stronger, with more numbers. They want to know if we'll break under pressure. Will we? No, the word was absolute, carrying centuries of certainty. House Thorne has stood for 900 years. We've survived worse than Corvin. Clara moved to his desk, studying the maps scattered across it. They showed the city divided into territories, marked with symbols she didn't understand. Show me how your world works. If I'm going to survive it, I need to understand it. Dorian joined her at the desk, and for the next hour, he taught her about the house's 7 major families ruling different territories across the city and beyond, about the laws that govern vampire society, ancient and brutal, about blood oaths and territory disputes, about the careful balance of power that kept the houses from open war. Here's House Corvin, he said, pointing to a section of the map. They control the Port District and most of the industrial quarter. Rich in resources, rich in influence. They've been trying to expand into our territory for decades, and House Thorne? Old city, historic district, less profitable, but strategically important. We control access to the underground network's catacombs, old tunnels, escape routes. His finger traced lines across the map. If war comes, those tunnels are worth more than gold. Clara studied the maps, committing details to memory. Through the bond, she felt Dorian's approval at her quick understanding. Her refusal to be overwhelmed by information. You're a natural strategist, he observed. I planned society events for 3 years. Seating arrangements, political alliances. Who gets offended if they're seated too far from the host? Clara shrugged. This isn't that different. Just with more blood and fewer tea services. Dorian's laugh was genuine, surprised out of him. Through the bond, Clara felt his amusement warm, unexpected, and quickly suppressed as though he wasn't used to feeling it. What? She asked. Nothing. Just he shook his head. Marguerite was sweet, kind. You're sharp, difficult, fierce, he corrected. And I'm beginning to think that's exactly what I needed. The words hung between them, charged with meaning. Clara felt heat in her cheeks that had nothing to do with her injuries. Through the bond, she caught an echo of his own emotions, attraction mixed with wariness. Desire tangled with guilt. A bell began tolling somewhere in the building deep. Resonant, 3 measured strikes. Dorian's expression changed instantly. That's the alarm. Someone's at the gates. Corvin? No, that's the diplomatic chime. He was already moving toward the door. Someone's requesting formal parley. Clara followed him into the hallway, where other vampires were emerging from their rooms. Isabeau appeared at the top of the stairs, her expression grim. It's a Corvin envoy, she called down, under white flag. They're requesting audience with Sibylla. And me? Dorian asked. And you're mortal. Isabeau's amber eyes found Clara. They want to see her. To verify the bond is real. Clara's stomach dropped. What happens if they don't believe it? Then they'll test it, Dorian said quietly. And testing blood oaths usually involves seeing how much pain one party can endure before the other breaks. Through the bond, Clara felt his determination absolute, unshakable. He would endure anything before he let them hurt her. That goes both ways, she projected fiercely. I'm not letting them hurt you either. His eyes met hers. And for a moment, the bond flared between them, no longer just connection, but something that felt like partnership. Come on, he said, offering his hand. Let's show Corvin what they're up against. Clara took it, and together they descended into the unknown. Chapter 10. The Shoiseth. Corvin envoy waited in what Sibylla called the receiving hall, a vast room with vaulted ceilings and walls, lined with tapestries depicting battles Clara suspected were historical records rather than artistic fancy. 3 vampires stood at the center, flanked by guards whose hands rested on weapons. The lead envoy was a woman who looked barely older than Clara, with platinum hair and eyes like chips of ice. Her clothes were expensively tailored, her bearing that of someone accustomed to absolute authority. When Clara and Dorian entered, those cold eyes assessed them with calculating precision. Lord Dorian, the woman said, her voice carrying aristocratic disdain. How quaint. Still collecting broken mortals, I see. Dorian's hand tightened on Clara's, but his voice remained level. Lady Serafini, to what do we owe the honor of Corvin's diplomatic attention? Diplomacy. Serafini's laugh was like breaking glass. Is that what we're calling it? Your house slaughtered 6 of ours tonight. 6 trained warriors, reduced to ash over a mortal girl who means nothing. She means everything. The words came from Dorian before he could stop them. Through the bond, Clara felt his immediate regret at the admission, but also the truth of it. Somehow, in the space of hours, she'd become essential. Serafini's smile widened. Does she? Then let's test that claim. She gestured, and one of her guards stepped forward, carrying a silver box. House Corvin proposes a bargain. A way to end this before it escalates into war neither house can afford. Sibylla moved forward from where she'd been watching in shadow. State your terms. Simple. The mortal is clearly bound, we can smell the oath on her. But bonds can be broken. Serafini opened the silver box, revealing a vial of dark liquid. This is pure nightshade extract, concentrated enough to kill a mortal in minutes. Agonizing minutes. If Lord Dorian truly values this girl, he'll refuse to let her drink it. But if he does refuse, her smile turned sharp. Corvin will consider it an admission that she holds strategic value, and will press our claim through combat. And if I consent to drink it? Clara heard herself ask. Every eye turned to her. Through the bond, she felt Dorian's horror, his desperate need to shut down this line of thinking. Don't. He projected with such force it nearly staggered her. Don't even consider it. Serafini's eyebrow lifted. If you drink it willingly, proving you're merely a moral crusade rather than strategic asset, Corvin will withdraw our claim. The siege ends. Your deaths tonight become regrettable casualties of a misunderstanding. No, Dorian stepped between Clara and the envoy. Absolutely not. This negotiation is over. Is it? Serafini tilted her head. Because from where I stand, Lord Dorian, you have two choices. Let us test the mortal's value through her death, ending the conflict cleanly. Or refuse. And we'll assume she knows secrets worth protecting, which means war. Full war. Every house will be forced to choose sides. Hundreds will die. All for one mortal girl. The weight of that choice settled over the room like a shroud. Clara could feel Dorian's emotions through the bond rage, terror, and underneath it all, the crushing guilt that this was his fault. His impulse at a wedding had led here, to this impossible moment. There has to be another way, Isabeau said from the doorway. Some alternative Corvin would accept. There isn't? Serafini's voice was final. We've been generous in offering negotiation at all. Most houses would have simply attacked until you surrendered the mortal. We're giving you a choice. Clara looked at the vile dark poison that promised an agonizing death. Then at Dorian, whose face had gone absolutely white. Through the bond, she felt him reaching for her, not physically, but emotionally, as though he could wrap himself around her soul and shield her from this. How long do we have to decide? Clara asked. Until dawn. Serafini snapped the box closed. We'll return at first light for your answer. Choose wisely, Lord Dorian. Your mortal's life, or hundreds of others. It shouldn't be a difficult calculation. The Corvin delegation departed with formal bows that mocked the gravity of what they'd proposed. The moment the doors closed behind them, Dorian turned to Clara, his control finally cracking. You're not doing it. I don't care what they threaten, hundreds of lives, Clara interrupted. She said hundreds would die. Let them. Dorian's voice was raw. Let the whole damn city burn before I let you, he stopped, pressing his hands to his face. Through the bond, Clara felt him fracturing, centuries of control splintering under the weight of this choice. There must be a loophole, Marcus said, already moving to a shelf of books. Some precedent in the old laws. There isn't. Sibylla's voice was heavy. Corvin knows what they're doing. It's an elegant trap. We refuse. They have cause for war. We accept. We lose the mortal and appear weak. Either way, they win. Then we fight, Isabeau said. Prepare for siege. Call our allies. Our allies will demand to know why, Sibylla interrupted. And when they learn we're risking war over a mortal Dorian met yesterday, most will side with Corvin. They'll say we're being unreasonable, sentimental. Clara moved to the window, looking out at the city. Dawn was still hours away, but she could feel time pressing in, inevitable as the tide. Through the bond, Dorian's emotions were a constant scream: denial, rage, desperation. She thought about her life before this. The careful society events, the proper courtships, the performance of being someone acceptable. Her fiancé had chosen her sister because Clara wasn't enough, not pretty enough, not compliant enough, not the right kind of ornament for his ambitions. She'd gone to that wedding to prove she wasn't broken, and now she had a chance to prove something else entirely. What if, Clara said slowly, there was a third option? Dorian was beside her instantly. No, whatever you're thinking, listen. Clara turned to face the room. Corvin's bargain assumes I'm either valuable or I'm not. But what if I'm something else entirely? What do you mean? Sibylla's dark eyes were sharp, interested. They think Dorian is using me as an informant, a servant, something strategic. They can't imagine he'd bond himself to a mortal just because. Clara looked at Dorian, feeling the connection between them pulse like a living thing. Just because he saw someone who needed saving and couldn't walk away. That's not a plan, Marcus said. That's sentiment. No, Clara's mind was racing now. It's proof. Corvin wants to test if I'm valuable. So we prove I'm not, but in a way that doesn't involve me dying. How? Isabeau asked. Clara moved to the table, her thoughts crystallizing. We give them what they think they want. Complete transparency. I'll meet with their envoy, answer any questions, prove I know nothing about vampire politics or strategic value. I'll be exactly what I am, a mortal woman who stumbled into something by accident. They won't believe you, Dorian said flatly. They'll think it's deception, then let them verify it. Clara looked at Sibylla. There are ways to read mortal minds, aren't there? To see truth from lies? The ancient vampire nodded slowly. Yes, but the process is invasive, painful. Not all mortals survive it intact, but some do. Some, through the bond. Clara felt Dorian's understanding of what she was proposing, followed immediately by his absolute rejection of it. No, won't let them inside your mind, it's not your choice. Clara said it gently but firmly. The oath binds you to protect me, not control me. You said that yourself. Clara, if Corvin can see I'm truly ignorant, truly not a strategic asset, they lose their justification for war. Clara held his gaze. I'm offering myself for examination, not execution. There's a difference, a small one, Marcus muttered, but a crucial one, Sibylla said. She studied Clara with something approaching respect. You'd submit to mental invasion, knowing it might break you? If it stops a war? If it saves lives, including everyone in this house who took me in? Clara straightened her spine. Yes. Dorian made a sound like something dying. Through the bond, she felt his anguish so acute it brought tears to her eyes. But underneath the pain, she also felt something else. Recognition. Understanding that this was her choice, made freely. And that was worth something. There's risk, Sibylla warned. If they find anything, any memory, any confidence Dorian shared about house business, they can claim strategic compromise anyway. Then we'll be careful, Clara said. Only surface memories. Nothing deep. It doesn't work that way, then we'll make it work. Clara looked around the room at the assembled vampires. Or we can wait for dawn and choose between my death or war. Those are the options Corvin gave us. I'm proposing a third. It's risky, but it's better than either alternative. The silence stretched. Finally, Sibylla nodded slowly. I'll send word to Corvin. Propose the terms. If they agree to verification instead of poison, she looked at Dorian. Can you hold yourself together through this? Watching them inside her mind. Dorian's face was carved from stone. Do I have a choice? We all have choices, Clara said softly. That's the whole point. She felt his response through the bond, love, too new to be named, too fierce to be denied, mixed with terror and helpless rage at his own powerlessness. She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. I'm not Marguerite, she whispered. I'm not running from you. I'm choosing to stand with you. There's a difference. His gray eyes met hers, and for a moment the bond between them sang not with fear or obligation, but with something that felt like hope. This ends badly, he said. I can feel it. Maybe, Clara agreed, but we end it together. That's new, right? Very new. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. And terrifying. Everything worthwhile is. Dawn came too quickly, bringing with it Corvin's answer. They would accept verification under their terms in their territory, with their mind reader. Clara walked out of House Thorn at first light, Dorian beside her, the bond between them burning bright as they stepped into the unknown. Behind them, their house stood ready for war. Ahead, Corvin waited to tear open her mind and judge what they found. And Clara, for the first time in her life, wasn't afraid of what anyone might see.